Okay, so in this tutorial, we're going to look at creating a simple little tail wagging animation. But the whole idea is how to keyframe something. In class, we've been using a bend deformer to make an object kind of wiggle or overlap its animation a little bit when it starts and stops and such. So, but what if you had to do this by hand? What if you had to create the bend? And this tutorial will lead into the idea or the assignment where you have to create kind of a procedural animation. So what we're going to do is keyframe some stuff where we're controlling the animation and use this overlapping method. But then we're going to take those components and use cloners and a bunch of different things that we could experiment with. So it will be a blend. But first, let's just start with what are the core components of setting up this simple little animation. So in class, I'm going to work somewhat quickly as I do this. So in class, we did something like, was this 20 by 100 by 20. So I have this little a knuckle, I guess, right? This little segment that I'm going to use. And I'm going to do a tail animation. So the one thing here is that if I try to rotate it, a tail rotates from a root, right? And then it translates out to the tip. So we have the pivot in the wrong place. Now, there are several ways that we could do this. We could use some different parenting hierarchy, but I'm doing this in such a way so that people can get used to the idea that you can move where the pivot is related to your object. So right now we made the object itself 100 units. And I'm going to start with the idea that I want the base of the tail here at the sitting on top of the grid. So let's go to coordinates, and since it's 100 units tall, let's move it 50 units up, right? We'll move it half that distance. So I have that there, but I still have the pivot in the center, and I can't move it as long as it's in this pre-packaged, this parametric object, right? This pre-packaged cube. So what I need to do is make it editable, something where I can start selecting the polygons if I need to, and I can move the pivot point. Now, if you really needed to keep this as a parametric object, there would be different ways of parenting this, but I'm going to assume that you do not at this point. So I'm going to select the object. The key or the GUI button is over here, right? Make editable, and you can see the shortcut is C. So it converts a parametric object into a polygon object. I will just hit C, and now the little icon changes over here, and it gives me this polygon object. And now I still have the same problem, right? It pivots from the center of the object, but over here along the sidebar with our tools, there's this one right here. Again, the shortcut's L, but it enables me to move the axis. I'm going to go grab the move tool and move where this pivot should happen, right? So if I wanted the pivot to, for whatever reason, I'll take L again, to be out here, right? I can pivot the object from that place, but that's not where I want it to be. I want it to be down here at the bottom. Oops. Hit L again, make sure that this is active. And so as I start to move this down, you can see the feedback. Cinema is telling me how many units I've moved it. So as soon as I click on it and I start to move it, if I then press down the shift key, as I continue to move it, Cinema will allow me to start moving it incrementally. It's like an incremental snap going on. So I'll move that down to, excuse me, my allergies are driving me crazy this morning. Oops. And then I'm going to turn that off, right, so that I'm not reorienting the axis. So you can see I have this, this component. All right, so to do the rest of the tail, I need some more segments, right? So I have this one here, and I will take this and just move it up. Maybe I'll move it up 100 and, oops. Let's see, what if I make it 110? Let's make it 105. Either way. And I'm also going to scale it. So the same thing here is I click just here in the screen. I'm not going to, I want to scale it on every axis here. So I'm just going to click not on the manipulator handle, but just out here. If I hold down shift, again, same thing. I get this incremental change. So I'm going to go 80% and I'll hold down the command key, drag and drop a third little segment in there. And I will move that up. 85 centimeters seems fine. Again, scale key, and I'll make this 80%. Now in class, I think I did a tail that had like 5 segments. I'm just gonna do 3. I'm gonna name it segment 1. I don't know if you could hear that in the background, but that was my cat wandering in my room, one of my cats being noisy. Okay, so I have this tail, and then I'm going to animate this, right? And so the nice thing here is if I click on all 3 of these, and I go over to, in this case, if I turn on the rotation, it's this axis here. So Cinema, if I grab the independent the axis handle, it's doing this, it's kind of grouping them, right, as it pivots. But if I come over, if I select all 3 of these, and I come over to the coordinate tab, in the attribute editor, we can see that polygon object is selected, and actually there's 3 of them, right? Segment number 1, number 2, number 3. So Cinema, if I make these changes, it's going to make it to each one of them. And if I change the rotation, you can see it's doing 33 degrees for this one, and then this one, and then this one. This is right. So this is how I've been able to get that to lean over to the point where it's, in fact, let's do this, right? So you can see if I do it 30 degrees, 30 degrees, and 30 degrees, I get this segment here. It basically is rotated 90 degrees, right? It's flat. So that's just how that compounds itself as it goes along. All right, before I animate, the first thing I'm gonna, oops, I want that, I'm just gonna hit Command D to bring up my project settings and just make sure I'm at 24 frames per second. And I'm gonna make this one, the preview range, 120 frames. Okay, so with this, all 3 of these segments selected, I'm gonna click on rotation so I can get all 3 of them and put a keyframe down. I'm gonna go to frame 24. And what did we did? We did something, let's make it just like 100, oops. Sorry, 33, so it'll end up being almost 100 degrees of rotation total. And that was at frame 24. Let's go to frame 60. We'll go all the way back. Let's do minus 33. And I'll put a keyframe on all those. And maybe here at 84, I'll do 0. So it comes all the way back for whatever reason, right? I just want to demonstrate how it works. So let's see, right? So it's kind of like a tail, right? It's bending over one way, then the other, and it comes back to the position. Do you notice the animation seems kind of stiff? I think the analogy I made in class was that it looks like a windshield wiper blade, right? So the problem here is that, I guess if it's mechanical, this could make sense, right? But if we're dealing with something that we want to imitate that was organic, again, like a tail, even if it was kind of like a fun little robot tail, there would be some overlapping motion, right? So when what should be happening as the tail starts to move over, the root of this tail, then the next segment should be a little bit delayed, and then this one should be a little bit delayed from segment 2, right? They should all be just a little bit after each other so that you get kind of a wave, and it's just the way things work, you know. Rarely do human bodies like come to the perfect position at the same time, and if I had my video camera on and I was gesturing, right, I might be moving my hips, and then I would lean forward with my chest, and then I would start to gesture with my arms, and then my hands would come to its resting point, right? So this is a very important concept, and important enough, obviously, we used it with the bend deformer, but now we're doing this by hand. So we could certainly just animate this, right, just knowing what we wanted to do, but there's also a way to use the dope sheet to illustrate this very quickly and start to lay out this overlapping motion. So I'm going to change to animate in my little view, and you can see that I now have the oops, click on this one. So I now have this all represented in the dope sheet, and I can see the keyframes that I put at 0, at 24, at 60, and 84. And so everything is happening at the same time, right? It all gets to this bend point at the same time. And that's not what I want. I want almost the way this, because the hierarchy is offset, right? it kind of leans to the right. I want the same thing to happen with the keyframes. So I'm going to select, so I don't need to select segment, right? That one's fine. But then after that, I want segment 2 and everything below it to be a little offset. So if I click on segment 2, if I click on rotation, it will just highlight the rotation values for segment 2 and only segment 2. If I click on segment 2, it selects all of its attributes that are animated and everything, all the attributes for the other objects in the hierarchy, which is really handy. So I'm going to take and offset this. I don't know, I'll do it a bunch. And I'll click on segment 3, and then I'm using this top toolbar, right, is my offset for how this is working. Right, and let's just maybe confirm all this stuff here. Let's click on everybody. And so we can see they all have the same animation on the Z, or the banking is what Cinemode would call this, is in its rotation. But you can see how they're all offset from each other, right? So if I just, there's this one, and then this one, and then this one, right? So very quickly we get something that's a little more natural across this this tail, right? Let's see, where am I at? 11 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to stop the tutorial here on this one, and I'll pick it up in part 2. So part 2 is about how we might take something like this and put it into a cloner system, and more importantly, how we might approach creating other little primitive motion systems, right? So this is a simple tail. What if we had a simple hinge or simple piston or some other little setup with these little joints, and I'll explain here in a second. So, all right, I'll see you in the next tutorial.